Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday broadcast. Today we're gonna do something a little bit different. Amy is out on vacation. Hope she's having so much fun. So I'm gonna be hosting it. I've been on here a couple of times, but just in case you've missed it before, my name is Maddie. I work with the clinicians at PB&J. I'm just an intern, an undergraduate intern, so I'm learning a lot right now. I've asked Mike, one of our other clinicians, to be here with me tonight, so we're going to learn a lot about him and about what he has to think about our topic. Um, I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself, take a few minutes, and then we'll jump right in.
Awesome. Thanks, Maddie. So my name is Mike Mortensen. Don't you always hate that question? Like, introduce yourself. There's just,
Oh yeah, I'm the
and then
worst at it.
I guess, kind of with this setting, I guess I should share kind of where I went to school and kind of what I do, at PB&J. So I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from Utah State University, and then went on to get my master's in clinical social work at BYU. I've been practicing for almost 5 years now, so I'm still kind of new into the field, but had some good experiences and some great clients to work with under my belt. I think first and foremost, I'm a husband and dad. Got an awesome, supportive wife who's my best friend, and I've got um, four amazing, crazy, awesome slash sometimes crazy kids, and and they're always a good time. In fact, you might hear some in the background, but that's just kind of dad life. Um, what else? Hobbies and stuff.
Yeah, I just talk about hobbies.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
So my wife likes to joke with me and say that my favorite hobby is finding new hobbies. Um,
I like
I
it.
I tend to get a new hobby pretty frequently. But some of the constants, I love snowboarding. I love being outside. We have a little hobby farm, so we got animals, and I like working out on the farm. And we've got goats that my wife milks, and um, raising pigs and goats and cows and a bunch of stuff. So that's always fun. Um, love sports. Played football in high school. Played rugby in college. I also really like the arts. I love reading. I like poetry a lot, and I'm kind of a D&D nerd. I love role playing games. Like I have like a little sliver of fantasy that I think is just awesome. I guess I don't know. I
Yeah,
feel like life's too short to only have like a couple different things, so I try a little bit of everything.
yeah, that's awesome. I like that you put it that way. So tonight we're going to be discussing a little bit about self-awareness and self-regulation. Last week in our video, if you haven't watched it, go ahead and go back. It's on our page and it's also going to be put on our website soon, so you can always access it. Last week, we talked a little bit about emotions and how to help them work with you rather than against you. And with emotions comes being aware of those emotions. And it isn't always super easy knowing how to get them to work for you. So that's a little bit kind of where self regulation comes in. Um, Everybody might have a different definition of what it means for them because everybody's different. But being able to be self aware basically just means knowing what we're feeling and why we're feeling that emotion, what we can do about it, how it makes our body feel, things like that. Whereas self regulation is what we're intentionally doing to respond to those emotions, which, like I said, can be totally different for everybody. So, Mike's going to take a few seconds and talk about those definitions and kind of the differences between those two.
Yeah, no, and yeah, thank you. I think this is such a good topic because um, you actually kind of gave one of the key answers there. You said that self-awareness is being able to know what we're feeling and why we're feeling it, and you mentioned in our body, and I think that's actually a really good key factor that sometimes we don't even think about. I'm sure maybe you've experienced this. I know I have, and maybe some
Yeah.
of our listeners and watchers have, where you'll go 3 or 4 days and you're in a funk and you're just like, what is going on with my life right now? And it doesn't really even seem like anything's wrong. But maybe people in our lives are concerned and we just don't feel happy, or things just feel off, right? And so those feelings, that physical response of feeling off, is information that our body is sending to our brain to help us be aware that something's off. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so being able to tie being aware, like that self-awareness, with how to regulate is extremely important. And I like that that was really insightful of you to, or whoever prepared this, to kind of put those things together, because we can't really regulate what we're not aware of. And so, for example, going back to the 3 days where I'm feeling off, if I have a tool but I don't really know that I need to use it yet, I'm not aware that it's time to use the tool, that tool doesn't really help me very much.
Yeah.
And so I think obviously that self-awareness is that first key piece. I mean, yeah, so for you in your life, Maddie, has there been times like that where you've just like, you've been
Oh
in a
yeah.
funk and you're feeling off
Right.
and you're just not really sure what's going on?
I think it's also important to acknowledge that it doesn't always have to be something that's extreme. I feel like even just sometimes with the weather can throw your mood off a lot, and I think that's what happens with me a lot.
Yeah.
And before I like how you put the two pieces together and connected that in order to regulate, you need to be aware. It's kind of like in order to know what to do to get yourself out of an uncomfortable situation, you have to know what to do to make yourself comfortable. Um, like I said, and I'm sure Mike can say the same thing, there are different skills for everybody, and everybody might use the same. Some people might use different ones. Um, I know we're going to get to the point where we talk a little bit about the skills, but for me, it's just a matter of really grounding myself when I feel dysregulated or something just feels
Yeah.
off. That's a really good way to put that. I like how you said something just feels off, because not all the time we know exactly what that means.
Yeah. And I think then to kind of define, self-regulation, I think one of the best tried and true examples is, a thermostat in your house.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, you feel most comfortable at 70 degrees, and then there's some external factors like the weather, you're saying, that is making that thermostat kick on or rise, right? Or lower.
Right.
And so regulation is the actions or the behaviors that we do in order to bring ourselves back to that 70 degrees or that most comfortable place for us. I think, yeah, some people call it window of tolerance. And I think maybe that was one of
Mm-hmm.
the things discussed a couple of weeks back as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, oh, that's awareness is hard though,
Yeah.
because have you ever driven to work and you show up and you're just like, how did I even get here today? Like, because we're kind of like up in our heads, or we're
Right.
listening to a song, or there's a
Yeah.
podcast on, and you're like, I really hope I didn't like hit and run someone on the way here, or run a red light, or and I think that a lot of being aware is being mindful and being present in the moment, because we spend so much time in our heads, and it's that kind of spending time in our heads that can sometimes betray us a little bit, and it can get really hard to actually experience life. And so when we start talking more about ways to bring that kind of into our awareness, there's some skills for that which can be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that it is really easy to get distracted, pay attention to other things rather than when the most important thing is to pay attention to your present self in the moment, especially when you're learning new skills and you're learning how to ground yourself after becoming aware, because you're so right. Being aware is hard and it might come easy for others, and it's really difficult to learn. Some of us might have to learn that the hard way, but being able to be aware. And I like the analogy that you gave about driving to work, because I think a lot of us can relate to that. I know for sure sometimes I get somewhere and I'm like, how did I, like, this does not up. How did I get here? Um, but it's that same thing, being able to reflect back and be in the moment and be aware, what's going on. Why was I able to be distracted so easily? Why am I feeling off? Those kind of things. That's a really good point.
Yeah. So if that's all right, just for the self-awareness piece, there's two things I think that in my experience working as a therapist to kind of help clients build that awareness,
Mm.
um, is so one of them is actually it's a meditation. And when you think about meditating, a lot of times, we get the whole where you close your eyes and you cross your legs and you do the whole Rafiki, ooh, kind of deal.
Yeah.
And and it doesn't have to be as structured as that. But I think a lot of people's mindset with meditation is I need to clear my mind, right? That's kind of the end goal. And I don't know about you, but like I teach this stuff all the time and I can't even do that. That's like impossible for
Right.
me.
It's hard. Yeah. Yeah.
And so in order to make meditation work for people who really struggle to focus, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do a little frame shift on it and we're going to make a different goal. So instead of the outcome of meditation being, I'm going to clear my mind,
Mm.
the outcome is when my mind wanders, I'm going to kindly, with empathy, remind it to come back, right? And so I want you to think about meditation as an exercise or a workout. If you were to go to the gym and you were to do 100 squats, you did 100 repetitions to strengthen the muscles in the posterior chain and your glutes and your legs and your quads, right?
Right.
When I'm meditating and my brain wanders and I gently guide it back, that's one repetition of me focusing, of me trying to be aware that I've wandered. And so let's say I meditate for 5 minutes and my brain wanders 500 times. A lot of people would just say, man, like I can't do this. Meditating it's impossible. I'm
Mm.
not going to try it again. When really, if we have the mindset of, wow, I just had a really good mental workout. I had 5 minutes of practicing being aware and bringing myself back to focusing on center, right?
Yeah.
And so that is actually a really good tool because then the more that you practice meditating that way, say you did that every day for a couple of weeks, I've had clients come back and be like, "Oh my gosh, it was crazy. I was in class and I was super bored because my professor was droning on about something that had nothing to do with class, and I caught my brain thinking about Jimmy John's, and I slowly brought it back to, oh wow, my brain has wandered, and I was able to be present with the class." Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 I really
And
like
so,
that. Sorry. I was
no,
gonna
you're
say
good.
I
There's a
really
lot. Keep
like
going.
that because it is kind of a good way to generally do that, right? I really like the example about thinking about something random during class. It doesn't always have to be something so extreme. I know I said that already, but that's a really great example. Because if we learn to be aware about things that are so simple and things that do distract us and let our mind wander off, and I like how you said, kind of gently pull that back and kindly. If you allow yourself to do that gently and kindly, it's a lot easier to grasp onto.
Yeah. Yeah, and it actually what's really cool too is, and we'll talk about this later, there's this other kind of framework that I wanted to bring up, but the moment that you tell yourself, "Wow, man, you're the worst. You can't do this skill," "Your therapist can be so disappointed in you, and you're just a head case." The moment that that happens, when the shame kind of sets in, we're more likely to feel anxiety. We're more likely to be
Mm,
depressed. We're less likely to be present and aware with our centered person in the moment.
right.
And so having that empathy and then that repeating that empathy to self is super important. And that is a really good grounding tool as well. So that meditation is one thing that I like to share with people. Another one, which can be kind of a fun game, where you get the client's phone and you actually set like 10 different alarms during like the waked hours. So you ask, what time do you
Yeah.
wake up and what time do you go to bed? And then the alarm just goes off at random times. Obviously, if you've got work and school, this might not, work very well. But
Right.
set it for times that you're able to kind of look at your phone, and the alarm just says, "How am I feeling?" And so what we're doing is we're
Mm,
practicing throughout the day, being able to say, "Okay, I'm feeling this way right now. What am I doing? Are my emotions kind of an outcome of where I am or who I'm with?" And a lot of times we find these patterns of like, man, I get really really stressed right after work, or I get really really nervous before I go into class, or I feel just kind of overwhelmed and tired when I hang out with this person. And so by being able to have these random check-ins throughout the day of what my emotions are, we do build awareness of how we're feeling and when we're feeling it.
Yeah. Colin, which is Amy's husband, says, "Did you know that meditation at the Bahamas is super relaxing?"
Oh, Colin.
Way to make us jealous. At least you're meditating. That's a really
Oh,
great thing.
that is awesome. I'm very proud of
um,
you. Colin
yeah,
also sent me a
seriously.
picture from the Bahamas,
That's
and
right.
I was very bummed because the picture I sent him was just 3 feet of snow. So
Yep, that's what we're dealing with here.
that's all right.
um, yeah, I like that too. Also, that kind of reminds me just a little bit of being able to do a body scan. We
Yeah.
talked about that in our video about the window of tolerance and also in our emotions video. Um, it's not super hard, but being able to do that body scan just a few times a day just to check up what do I need to do? Do I need to relocate? Do I need to, things like that? That's another really great way to do that.
Cool. Yeah. Body scans are awesome. It's part of that biofeedback model that really helps us become, aware. I don't know about you, and maybe,
Yeah.
if you want to share what happens for you, but me, I feel like I've got like rocks in the back of my neck, like my
Hmm.
shoulders get super tight, and I end up getting a headache and my neck just
Yeah.
hurts when I'm stressed.
Yeah.
What about
And I
you?
think that's interesting that, that phrase that everybody says, I've always got a lot of weight on my shoulders, all this tension. And I quite literally feel that, like more on my shoulders. And then it maybe it's more of like a mental, emotionally thing, but I feel weighed down really heavily, especially with stress. And um, not only do I get headaches as well, but I get like like tension aches in my body. And
Yeah.
being able to do that body scan and do skills to be self-aware um, has really helped me be able to realize that. So yeah.
Yeah. And so, just and I totally agree with what you're saying because there are times where, you'll just like see someone in public and like their entire body posture, you're just like, oh man, that dude's
Right.
having a rough go. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
can just like
Yeah.
see that weight on them. And so I think as a good summarizing for kind of the self-awareness piece is, there's some really good meditative practices that we can do.
Mhm.
um, whether that's the one that I explained or the body scan that you've explained or some other things like that, doing some random alarms. But also, mostly it's being able to tap into our physical body, that biofeedback, and really being able to get in tune with that. Everyone has 2 or 3 cues physically that they feel when the emotions kind of go out of whack. And so if we
Yeah.
can get keyed into those, then we know, oh, hey, this is the time to self-regulate. This is the time to plug in that tool.
Yeah. Would you mind describing a little bit more about a biofeedback, just in case anybody doesn't really know what that is?
Yeah. So like biology, it's kind of like our body and feedback, right? It's information coming back to us. And so every single time that we experience something, our body reacts a certain way. So for example, we hear a scary sound and we don't know what it is, and all of a sudden the
Mhm.
hair stands up on the back of your neck or your stomach drops. Or, you just hear that you got the big promotion and you just can't help but smiling and you want to scream and jump. Your favorite sports team wins the big game and you're shouting and jumping around and hugging every, strangers that you don't even know at the stadium. And so our body gives cues to how we're feeling inside. And so becoming more aware of those can be really, really helpful when we're trying to regulate those.
Right.
Because, for example, jumping and screaming and shouting in the setting of, your team winning the Super Bowl that's okay. That's a big deal. Let's do that all day, all
Yeah, for
week,
sure.
right? Vikings will never do it. But anyways, so it's the story of my life. However, you're in the middle of class and your teacher's giving a lecture and you jump up and you scream and you shout and you're just like trying to chest bump people. It's probably not the time for that, right? So
Right.
um, there's times and places for all these emotions, and emotions aren't negative things. It's information of how we feel, these behaviors, right? And
Yeah.
so just being able to be aware when's the right time, when's the right place, and then being able to regulate those when it might not be the most appropriate time to feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you say, even if you want to talk about it on more of like a clinical level or your personal life, but when would you say is a good time to know um, when to regulate yourself? Does that make sense? So you're already aware of what you're feeling. Maybe some people aren't really totally aware, but something's off. And I need to do something to ground myself.
Yeah, I think the moment that you have that moment, even if it's like 3 days past and you're like, "Holy cow, I've been stressing out because of this one thing," the moment that you recognize it is really important
Yeah.
because the, stress and anxiety compounds. It grows with interest, right?
Hmm.
And so we can carry that over from day to day. It affects our relationships, it affects our work performance, it affects our life satisfaction. And so the moment that your brain keys in and is aware that you're feeling off is the perfect time to plug in a tool. And when you get really, really good at it and you practice it, you could even get to the point where we're anticipating stress. We know that this, certain thing where we do a live stream on Facebook really stresses us out. And so
Right.
I'm going to do a breathing technique before I get on so I feel a little bit better, right? Or I know that when I go to Walmart and it's, holiday season, I'm going to lose my mind. And so I got to sit in my car.
Seriously.
I got to regulate before,
Mm,
right? And then that way I can go in and I can kind of present myself and then use my tools throughout, right? But I think
yeah.
that's kind of one of those later skills, right? But I think
Right.
building that awareness right when that happens in the moment. And one thing I always tell people is it's best to practice these skills if we're gonna, kind of segueing into the self-regulation piece. The best time to practice a skill is when things are good.
Hmm.
Because if you're practicing a skill when you're stressed out and overwhelmed, our brain might not really know how to work around all that because it is such a new skill. And the example I always give is, when would you rather learn to swim? 3 p.m. at the city pool with a lifeguard on duty, you're in the shallow end and you got all your family supporting you.
Right.
Or 3 a.m., you just fell off the side of a cruise ship, and there's a storm coming in.
Yeah.
And that's how it feels for people. When
Yeah.
we're emotionally dysregulated, it feels like we're drowning and we have no support.
Right.
And that time might not be the best time to practice a skill. We'll try it for a few moments. Our head's not really in it. And then we're like, no, never mind. And then we just kind of go back to what we've always done. And so,
Hmm.
um, plugging in those tools can be helpful. Let's say you talk to your therapist and he gives you a tool. Practice that every single day for just like 1 minute, 2 minutes in the morning, and then throughout the day when you need it, when you are stressed, right? That way your brain is creating a new pathway that's saying, hey, this skill works for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like how you said sometimes being able to do it before, like the Walmart example. If you know you're going to go into a stressful situation or into a situation where you might feel a little bit off, you're not to that level of homeostasis in your window of tolerance, it is good to practice those things before. And that's a good thing to implement for sure.
Yeah. And it can be really hard, but the more that you practice
Hmm.
it when times are good, the easier it'll be when times aren't so good.
Right. Yeah. So we're talking an awful lot about skills. A lot of us might not know a lot of skills. So if you wouldn't mind discussing a few, maybe for kids or adults or just anybody in general, that might be good.
Yeah, of course. So I think some of the best, I guess, as a therapist, some of the best successes that I've had with people is breathing and meditation exercise is always a very, very helpful one. I think mindfulness, where you're able to kind of check in with your five senses, is also very powerful. I think that's a really good one because anxiety transports you to the future or to the past and it takes you away
Hmm.
from the present moment. But if you really key into your present moment, we're safe like 99.9% of the time.
Right. Yeah.
But anxiety tells you the exact opposite, right? And so
Right.
if you can kind of take a look around and you can, okay, what can I see? What can I smell? Some people carry, like essential oils with
Hmm.
them to kind of help ground them. Um, Music can kind of be that double-edged sword where you listen to a song and it can kind of like jazz you up and make you feel good, or
Right.
it's got that power to just lean into
Set
that
you
negative
off.
emotion and just set you
Hmm.
off, right?
Yeah.
So I would be careful with some of those sensory cues, but mindfulness is also a really powerful one. There's something also about journaling that can be really powerful, where
Hmm.
I'm taking the stuff that's up here that's all mixed up and kind of feels loose, and I'm putting it in a tangible form. I'm writing it down, and I can actually hold it in front of me. And guess what? There's distance now. This thing is removed
Right.
from me, and then I can close it and I can put it in the top drawer of my nightstand or my dresser. And it's a good way to visually see that I've compartmentalized the stuff that I'm
Yeah.
overwhelmed with.
Yeah.
Um, I think physical activity is just highly underutilized in mental health. I think going for a walk, I think exercising, going and lifting weights, running around the block, I think connecting with people. Some of the most stressful times I have in my life are because of my kids, but also some of the
Yeah.
most amazing grounding times I have in my life are because of my kids. Come home, turn the phone off, we play superheroes for a little bit and everything's good. And
Yeah.
in fact, um, yeah, so does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I like that for sure. And in our previous videos, we've talked a little bit about things like massage and acupuncture
Yeah,
and how those things kind of help as well because they cue into these parts of your brain that might be contributing to those, stressful events or areas of dysregulation, which isn't always what we want to feel. So being able to find that grounding technique, whether it is physical activity or journaling, that's personally I like to journal, but for other
yeah,
people, massage and acupuncture work a lot better. So there are a ton of different options. Just it's just all about finding the right one for you that helps you be more
right.
aware and helps you feel more regulated.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I love that you're saying that because every single person is different. I have people that love meditation. I got people that just can't do it.
Yeah.
I got people that love writing and people that are like, I don't want this to be an English class.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So,
For sure.
and
Yeah.
then I know we're kind of wrapping up, but I think, the last thing I want to say is for kids, I think the number one thing that's really, really helpful for them to regulate is to give them words, to give them a
Mhm.
language. Sometimes a lot of reasons why kids locked out is because they can't communicate what they're feeling, and so and it's how do I regulate what I don't understand.
Right.
And so there's a really, really good skill. It's called the hand brain. It's from Dan Siegel. He wrote a lot of really, really great books with kids, and he said this is our brain when we're feeling okay, this is our homeostasis, and then this is our brain when we're feeling overwhelmed, right? And so if
Yeah.
you go up to a kid and you say, "Are you feeling like this today?" And they say, "Yeah, Dad, I'm feeling like this." Okay, why don't we do this? And you take a big deep breath.
Okay.
And you take 5 good deep breaths. And by the time that we're here, they might not be totally good, but they're in a place where they can kind of have a conversation with you, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of really good imagery. Art is really good for kids. Imaginative play, just going down
Mhm.
and building stuff, smashing toys, you know what I mean? Just like being
Yeah.
able to let them express is a regulation. So
Yeah. No, I like that. Would you say that, um, like playing games is another way for kids to be able to express that
totally.
emotion or dysregulation?
Yeah. I think playing games is huge, because that's how kids play. Kids don't
Mm.
communicate, "Hey, mom, I had a really bad day at school today, and this and
Right.
this and this happened, and I feel this way." Kids are going to act out, and so by being physical, by playing, that can really help them. I personally think sometimes, though, if we can give them the language first, so they can be aware of what's happening, that can
For
help them
sure.
in the future learn to self-regulate. Because as parents and caretakers, our job sometimes is to help teach regulation to them, but we want to teach that to them so they can do it on their own. So they have the words and they have that language and they can identify
Right.
what's happening. They build that awareness, then the self-regulation can kind of come in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about self-awareness and self-regulation. Like I said, you can cue into other videos previously. They're just on our page if you want to learn more. Mike, do you have anything else to add tonight about this topic?
No, no, I think we did a pretty bang up job.
Yeah, I would say. Okay, well, thanks so much for joining. We'll be back next week. Probably be me and Amy again. We might have to bring some other people in. That was really fun.
That was
Um,
awesome. Thank you.
Comment or message if you have any questions or ideas for topics that you'd like to see discussed. And until then, we'll see you next week. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Maddie.